understands the economic models, and he understands through the application of economic reasoning why some of these socialist ideas are so erroneous. But he says that they nonetheless appeal to him. And the reason they do so is not because of their economic soundness, but because of the issues that they speak to. And I thought that that was very, very interesting to hear, because they said to me, and this was one of their critiques of individualism, that individualism comes across as being very self-centered. It's about the individual and about no one else. And you know, I thought, I mean, I disagreed with the position, but I thought it was a very interesting one. And this obviously reminds me of my own intellectual journey, seeing as we just spoke about yours. I was also a pretty committed Marxist. I changed my views, I would say late second year. And I would say the main reason I was a Marxist was because of apartheid as well. And mainly because of the role that the Communist Party played in the abolition of apartheid. And it was the one truly non-racial party in South Africa. And I think that's the other thing that really appealed to me. So, you know, my parents come from that era of the struggle, and they would always, you know, tell us stories, you know, about where they came from, and, you know, some of the things that they had witnessed, which was just awful. Some of the stories that we would hear growing up were unimaginable. And they are the kind of stories that would, you know, fuel resentment in you. And when you heard that there was a party that had in it people of all races who were opposed to this thing, you obviously took a liking to it. And in my case, it was the Communist Party. And, you know, I came to university committed as a Marxist. Some of my friends that I'm friends with today, I absolutely abhorred. Like, I just really wanted nothing to do with them because of how outspoken they were about their views. And obviously me thinking that their views are from a place of privilege, and, you know, them just not understanding where myself and other people who come from similar positions, you know, came from. And it was upon having these intellectual discussions with people, because I've always been, you know, very, very fond of just having conversations with people. So I would have conversations all the time, every single time. And one of my friends, Robert Kuchera, he's actually a Marxist today. We've had two opposing trajectories. He introduced me to Thomas Sowell. And I was like, oh, okay. He's not exactly my kind of economist, but I'll give him a listen, because, you know, of course, he comes from the United States, he comes from the South, he comes from the Jim Crow South during the heights of the Great Depression, and this is a black guy that I thought could relate to me. And upon reading Thomas Sowell, he planted a landmine in everything that I had believed, and it just detonated, and everything that I had believed exploded. But of course, he was not the only one. It was him and Walter Williams, equally black, and he wrote a brilliant book called South Africa's War on Capitalism. We won't discuss the contents of the book, but it was him, and it was Thomas Sowell and that book by Walter Williams that for me just really undid my Marxism. And there's a funny joke that Thomas Sowell tells about himself and the late Walter Williams, sadly. He says he used to tell Walter Williams that they should never ever be on the same flight together, because if something were to happen to that flight, that would be the end of black American conservatism. And I thought that was very interesting. But yeah, that's my intellectual transformation, not as elaborate as yours, but I think, yeah, I mean, it's always really nice reflecting on one's journey, and I thought I'd do the same, having asked you to do that.
No, Phila, you got there more quickly than I do. I admire you for it. I am a bit embarrassed about the amount of time I spent as a left-wing economist, but, you know, the only consolation I have is I did so with a brilliant scholar, and what he taught me was to become a scholar. And so I learned scholarship from him, even though, unfortunately, the content that we covered was ultimately all wrong. You learn from great economists, by the way. Sowell and Williams are absolutely fantastic, and they will do it for you. So if you enter that discussion as a collectivist or a socialist, you're going to have a tough time. So that's, can I just respond to your friend's comment? So I love that comment. I've made it myself. When I was an undergrad student, I remember a discussion we had in my third year, in which, again, you know, I have so many of these embarrassing comments that I can reflect on that I've made over time. And this was one of them. So a friend of mine, who's now still a dear friend of mine and a great economist here in Stellenbosch, and he was a market economist throughout his life. I've always said, you know, I had to kind of learn to join him over time. And so he was stating the sort of pro-market case in class. And I remember this comment I made was that he might be right on technical stuff, but it is not a proper vision for society. So that somehow the left-wing vision was a more inspiring vision for society. And it is this point that somehow it's grubby, individualistic, as opposed to this beautiful vision that you read for us as the counterpoint in The Underground Man. And I think that is, when we talk about Popper later on, we're going to see that that is also a mistake. It's a mistake to think that when you grapple with the position of the individual as part of an emerging social order, that is not an unattractive vision. It's in fact a necessary vision. If you want to take social science seriously, you have to start with the individual, but you start with the individual as part of a social order.
Right.
So it's not what we call atomistic individualism. That's a misunderstanding. Market economics is not about atomism. It's about an individual within a social order. And in fact, you can only really understand the questions of economics once you see the context of the individual within the social order. I sometimes tell students it's this. So we have models in economics that are called Robinson Crusoe models. Like that's a one decision maker model. And that's really not economics. So economics only starts when Friday arrives, when we've got at least 2 people on the island. That's when economics starts, because now questions of collaboration come, questions of mutual accommodation come. And this is what we mean when we talk about competition and collaboration in economics, is we talk about that mutual accommodation in an emerging social order.
Right. And I think that's a fantastic point, because, and actually what it's reminding me, and where I wish to go now in